The first time Dr. Emily Watson heard the alien voices through the static, she thought her equipment was broken. Deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, surrounded by walls of rock and steel that blocked every signal from the outside world, she worked alone in a room filled with screens and wires. The year was 2089, and humanity thought they were alone in the universe. Emily adjusted the frequency one more time and heard it again. Words that were not words, patterns that meant something but made no sense. She had been listening to space for 20 years, hoping to find proof that life existed beyond Earth. What she found instead was proof that life had been watching them all along. The voices came from everywhere. Satellites that shouldn't exist floated in space around Earth, talking to each other in languages that computer programs slowly began to decode. Ships moved between the stars, carrying reports about the small blue planet and its violent inhabitants. Emily realized with growing horror that Earth was not hidden in empty space but surrounded by watchers, who studied them like animals in a cage. She printed the first translation and read it with shaking hands. The document spoke of humans as a dangerous species that must be contained. It mentioned weapons that could destroy worlds and debates about whether Earth should be destroyed or simply watched until its people killed themselves. The paper fell from her fingers as she understood the truth that would change everything. Humanity was not alone, but they were prisoners. Emily made copies of everything and took them to the only person she trusted. General Marcus Stone had fought in 3 wars and seen enough death to understand when his species was in real danger. He read the translations in his office while snow fell outside the window, and his face grew darker with each page. "How long have they been watching us?" he asked. "At least 200 years, maybe longer," Emily replied. "They put up barriers around our solar system when we first started using radio. They've been listening to everything we say and reporting back to something called the Galactic Council." Marcus put down the papers and walked to the window. Outside, people went about their normal lives, not knowing that alien eyes watched their every move. Children played in the snow while their parents worked and worried about human problems, unaware that beings from other worlds had already decided their fate. "What do they want?" Marcus asked. "Nothing," Emily said, and the word hung in the air like a death sentence. "They don't want anything from us. They just want us to stay here until we die out or destroy ourselves. We're too violent for them to talk to and too dangerous to ignore." Marcus turned back to face her. "Can we fight them?" Emily had been afraid he would ask that question. "Their technology is thousands of years ahead of ours. They have ships that can destroy planets and weapons we can't even understand. Fighting them would be suicide." "Then what do you suggest?" Emily pulled out another set of papers, these covered with diagrams and calculations she had been working on for months. "We learn. We study their technology and figure out how it works. We build our own ships and weapons while they think we're still primitive. We get ready for the day when they decide we're too dangerous to live." Marcus looked at the plans and saw something that made his soldier's heart race with possibility. The designs were rough, but they showed ships that could hide from alien sensors and weapons that might actually hurt their enemies. More importantly, they showed a way for humanity to surprise the beings who thought they knew everything about them. "This would take decades," Marcus said, "maybe longer. We'd need the best scientists and engineers from every country, and we'd have to keep it secret from everyone else on Earth." "The alternative is extinction," Emily replied. Marcus made his decision that day, and within a year, Project Looking Glass was born. Scientists disappeared from universities and research centers, officially taking new jobs, but actually going to hidden facilities around the world. Engineers who worked on space programs found themselves recruited for projects that didn't officially exist. Military officers received orders that came from no government but had to be followed anyway. The work began in secret bases carved out of mountains and hidden under oceans. In the Sahara Desert, a facility disguised as a solar power plant built the first engines that could push ships faster than light. Under the Pacific Ocean, another base worked on shields that could stop alien weapons. In space, disguised as communication satellites, human ships began to watch the Watchers. Emily led the research while Marcus handled security and recruitment. They learned to decode alien languages and understand alien technology. When pieces of crashed alien ships were found, teams recovered them in secret and studied every component. Slowly, humans began to build their own versions of weapons and tools that their captors thought no primitive species could understand. The hardest part was keeping the secret. Presidents and prime ministers were told just enough to ensure cooperation, but not enough to panic. Scientists worked on projects without knowing what their research would become. Families watched loved ones disappear into classified programs and had to trust that their sacrifice served a greater purpose. Years passed, and the alien watchers saw nothing unusual. Humans continued to fight small wars and struggle with poverty and disease, just as they always had. The hidden observers recorded everything and sent reports to their superiors confirming that Earth remained contained and primitive. They never noticed the new satellites that looked like space junk or the mining operations that went too deep into asteroids. By 2150, humanity had built its first real warship in a hollowed-out asteroid beyond Pluto. The ship was small compared to alien vessels, but it carried weapons designed from captured technology and shields that could hide it from any scanner. More importantly, it carried a crew that had trained for decades to fight an enemy that didn't know they existed. Emily was old now, her hair white and her hands shaking, but her mind remained sharp. She watched the first ship launch from the hidden base and felt tears on her cheeks. Humanity had spent 60 years in secret, learning and building and preparing for a war that might never come. But if it did come, they would be ready. The ship disappeared into the darkness between stars, carrying with it the hopes of a species that refused to die quietly. Behind it, construction continued on dozens of other vessels while scientists worked to unlock the final secrets of faster-than-light travel and planetary shields. The aliens thought they were watching a primitive world full of violent children who would eventually destroy themselves. What they were actually watching was the quiet preparation of a species that had decided to fight for its freedom, no matter what the cost. In the deepest bunkers, final preparations began for the day when humanity would announce itself to the galaxy not as prisoners but as equals. The coffee in Commander Tarn's cup had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't notice. For the past 15 years, he had been stationed above the primitive world called Earth, watching creatures that barely knew how to leave their own atmosphere. It was the most boring assignment in the Galactic Council's fleet, which was exactly why officers who had made mistakes got sent there. Tarn's mistake had been questioning orders during the rebellion of Kepler 9. The Council valued obedience above all else, so now he spent his days watching humans kill each other with chemical explosives while his career slowly died in the darkness between stars. His ship, the Vigilant, hung in space invisible to human eyes, recording everything and sending reports that nobody important ever read. Today felt different, though he couldn't explain why. His crew of 12 Altarian officers moved through their duties with the same mechanical precision they had shown for years, but something in the air made Tarn nervous. Perhaps it was the way Lieutenant Kira kept frowning at her sensor display, or how Ensign Bex had been checking the same system readings 3 times instead of once. "Sir," Kira called from her station, breaking the silence that had filled the bridge for hours. "I'm detecting an unusual reading from the outer system." Tarn walked over to look at her screens, grateful for anything that might break the monotony of another empty day. The display showed a small blip near the asteroid belt, barely visible among the rocks and debris that floated in the darkness. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than another piece of space junk. "Probably debris from one of their primitive rockets," Tarn said, but something about the reading bothered him. The object was too regular, too purposeful in its movement to be natural. "Run a detailed scan." Kira's fingers danced across her controls, and the display changed to show energy signatures and material compositions. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The object wasn't made of the crude metals and plastics that humans used in their space program. Instead, it showed traces of quantum-aligned materials and energy patterns that shouldn't exist anywhere in this backward system. "Commander," Kira said slowly, "this isn't human technology." Tarn felt ice form in his stomach. If non-human technology had somehow reached Earth, it meant the quarantine had been breached. Council law was clear about what happened to species that acquired advanced technology before they were ready. The last species to break quarantine had been the Veltari, and their homeworld was now a cloud of radioactive dust. "Are you certain?" Tarn asked, though he could see the readings himself. "The quantum signature is unmistakable," Kira replied. "This is technology at least as advanced as our own, possibly more so. But it doesn't match any council species in our database." Tarn's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. Either an unknown alien species had made contact with Earth, or the humans had somehow developed impossible technology in secret. Both scenarios would require immediate action from the Council, and both would likely result in Earth's destruction. "Launch a probe," he ordered. "Full stealth protocols. I want to know everything about that object." The probe shot out from the Vigilant like a silver dart, its sensors reaching out to examine the mysterious craft. As it approached, the readings became even more confusing. The object appeared to be a ship of some kind, but its design principles made no sense. The hull seemed to bend light around itself in ways that should have been impossible, and the energy core showed power outputs that defied known physics. "Sir," Ensign Bex called from the communications station. "The probe is being scanned." Tarn spun around. "What do you mean, scanned?" "Something is examining our probe with sensors I don't recognize. The technology appears to be more advanced than ours." Before Tarn could respond, the mystery ship simply vanished. One moment it was there, clearly visible on their screens, and the next it had disappeared completely. Not cloaked, not hidden behind an asteroid, but gone as if it had never existed at all. "Full sensor sweep," Tarn barked. "Find that ship." His crew worked frantically, pushing their equipment to its limits, but found nothing. Whatever the mysterious vessel was, it had technology that could hide from the most advanced sensors in the galaxy. The implications made Tarn's blood run cold. What he didn't know was that the human ship Defiance now hung just 2 kilometers from his vessel, completely invisible and recording everything. The ship's captain, Maria Santos, watched the alien. Crew scrambled to find her and smiled grimly. 60 years of secret development had led to this moment, when humanity could finally turn the tables on their watchers. "Full spectrum analysis of their ship," Santos ordered her crew. "I want to know everything about their weapons, shields, and communication systems." The human ship's sensors, built from reverse-engineered alien technology and improved by human innovation, penetrated the Altarian vessel's defenses like they didn't exist. Within minutes, Santos had complete technical specifications of the alien ship, its crew complement, and its mission parameters, but more importantly, she had something else. Hidden in the ship's communication logs were the locations of every other Council vessel in the system, their patrol routes, and their orders. The aliens had been so confident in their technological superiority that they had never bothered to encrypt their local communications properly. "Send everything to command," Santos ordered. "Priority 1. The message flashed through space via quantum entanglement, a technology that humans had mastered while their captors still used primitive, faster-than-light communication. Within seconds, Admiral Hayes and the rest of the human fleet knew exactly where every enemy ship was located and what they were planning. Back on the Vigilant, Tarn was composing the most important report of his career. The message would travel to the Council homeworlds and alert them to a possible quarantine breach of the highest magnitude. Ships would come, probably entire fleets, to investigate what had happened in the Sol system. "Sir," Kira said quietly, "what if the humans somehow acquired this technology themselves?" Tarn considered the possibility and dismissed it immediately. "Impossible. We've been watching them for 200 years. They can barely manage chemical rockets and nuclear fusion. There's no way they could develop quantum technology without us noticing." He was wrong, of course, but the mistake was understandable. The Council had spent centuries believing that technological development followed predictable patterns. They had charts and formulas that showed exactly how long it should take any species to advance from one level to the next. Humans, according to their calculations, were still thousands of years away from faster-than-light travel. What the Council had never considered was that a species under threat might find ways to accelerate their development that broke all the normal rules. Desperation, it turned out, was a powerful motivator that their formulas had never accounted for. Tarn's report went out that day, carried by quantum communication to the Council chambers on 12 different worlds. Within hours, emergency sessions were called and fleets were mobilized. The possibility that Earth's quarantine had been compromised sent shock waves through the galactic government that had maintained order for 3,000 years, but the humans were ready for this response. They had been intercepting Council communications for decades and knew exactly how their enemy would react. Ships that had been hidden throughout the galaxy began moving toward Earth, while defense platforms that looked like asteroids powered up their weapons for the first time. The Watchers had finally seen something that worried them, but they had no idea that what they feared was not some unknown alien threat. The danger came from the very species they had been observing. The supposedly primitive humans who had spent 2 centuries learning everything their captors knew while staying invisible. In plain sight, the trap was set, and all that remained was for the Council to walk into it. The Council chamber filled with voices speaking in 12 different languages, but the universal translator made every word crystal clear. High Chancellor Vex stood at the center of the great circle, his scaled hide reflecting the light from stars visible through the transparent dome above. Around him, representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy argued about a single question that could reshape everything they knew: what was happening in the Sol system. Ambassador Zeta of the Crystalline Collective shimmered with agitation, her translucent body changing colors as she spoke. The evidence cannot be denied. Something with technology equal to or greater than our own has appeared in the quarantine system. This represents a breach of protocols that have kept peace for 3 millennia. Perhaps, rumbled General Corax of the Mantid war clans, his forearms gesturing emphatically. But we must consider all possibilities. The readings could indicate contact with an unknown species, or they could mean something far more troubling. Counselor Yara of the aquatic depths floated in her water-filled sphere, her tentacles moving in patterns that indicated deep concern. You speak of troubling possibilities, General. What could be more troubling than first contact with a hostile species? Corax clicked his mandibles in the mantid equivalent of a bitter laugh. The humans developing this technology themselves. Silence fell across the chamber like a physical weight. The suggestion violated everything the Council understood about technological development and species advancement. No quarantined world had ever broken free through their own efforts. It was considered impossible by every scientific model they possessed. Preposterous, declared Ambassador Renth of the Silicon. Minds, his mechanical voice carrying no emotion. Our observations of the human species span 2 centuries. They remain locked in primitive conflicts using chemical weapons and nuclear fusion. Their most advanced spacecraft can barely reach their own moon. And yet, Vex said quietly, Commander, Tarn's report describes technology that our best scientists cannot explain. A ship that uses principles of physics we do not understand, powered by energy sources that should not exist. The debate continued for hours, with representatives arguing over data and possibilities while the real question remained unspoken. If the humans had somehow developed advanced technology in secret, what did that mean for the Council's authority over the galaxy? Dr. Neth of the Academic Collective projected holographic displays showing human development over the past 2 centuries. The images revealed a species that fought constantly among themselves, depleted their planet's resources, and showed all the signs of a civilization destined for self-destruction. Nothing in the data suggested they were capable of the technological leap that Tarn had reported. The pattern is consistent with every other quarantined species, Neth explained. Rapid population growth followed by resource depletion, leading to increasing conflict and eventual collapse. The humans are currently in the final stages of this cycle. Within 50 years, their civilization should destroy itself. Then how do you explain what our patrol detected? asked Vex. Neth's tentacles writhed in uncertainty. I cannot. The readings contradict everything we know about species development. General. Korax leaned forward in his seat. There is another possibility we have not discussed. What if the humans have been aware of our surveillance all along? The chamber erupted in protests and denials. The Council's technology was perfect, their stealth capabilities absolute. No primitive species had ever detected their presence, let alone learned to hide from their sensors. The suggestion struck at the very foundation of everything they believed about their own superiority. Impossible, Rent stated flatly. Our surveillance systems are beyond their comprehension. They lack the basic understanding of quantum mechanics necessary to even perceive our presence. But Yara's tentacles moved in patterns that suggested deep thought. Yet if they were somehow watching us while we watched them, it would explain many things. How else could they develop technology that matches our own without us noticing? Vex called for order as the debate threatened to spiral out of control. The possibility that humans might have been studying them while appearing primitive challenged everything the Council represented. If one quarantine species could fool their surveillance for centuries, how many others might be doing the same? We need more data, Vex declared. I am ordering the deployment of the 7th Fleet to the Sol System. They will conduct a thorough investigation and determine the nature of this threat. And if they find that the humans have indeed developed advanced technology? Asked Zeta. Vex's scaled face showed no emotion, but his voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of galactic law. Then we will implement Final Protocol 7. The system will be sterilized completely. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Final Protocol 7 had been used only twice in the Council's history, both times against species that had somehow acquired technology beyond their developmental stage. In each case, entire star systems had been reduced to empty space to prevent the spread of contamination to other worlds. What the Council members didn't know was that their every word was being recorded by sensors so advanced that even their best security couldn't detect them. The humans had long ago learned to hide their technology inside the Council's own equipment, using principles of quantum entanglement that made detection impossible. Admiral Hayes sat in his command center beneath Luna's surface, listening to the aliens debate his species' fate with the same detached interest they might show discussing the weather. Around him, his staff monitored communications from across the galaxy as Council fleets began moving toward Earth. They're mobilizing everything, reported his intelligence chief, Colonel Park. 17 battle groups from 8 different species, all converging on our system. Estimated arrival time is 6 days. Hayes nodded calmly. 60 years of preparation had led to this moment when humanity would either win its freedom or be destroyed in the attempt. The Council's response was exactly what his strategists had predicted. They would come in overwhelming force, expecting to find a primitive world that had somehow stumbled onto advanced technology. Instead, they would find a trap that had been decades in the making. Signal all fleet commanders, Hayes ordered. Operation Sunrise begins in 72 hours. All ships are to maintain stealth protocols until the final moment. Throughout the solar system, hidden bases powered up weapons that had never been tested in battle. Ships that had been disguised as asteroids and space debris prepared to reveal themselves. On Earth itself, defense grids that looked like communication networks began charging energy that could destroy planets. The Council thought they were dealing with a primitive species that had gotten lucky. They had no idea they were walking into a confrontation with beings who had studied their every weakness for 2 centuries, while building weapons specifically designed to exploit those flaws. In the depths of space, human ships that had been watching Council worlds for decades began moving toward their home systems. If the Council wanted to play by the rules of galactic warfare, humanity was prepared to show them that those rules could work both ways. The trap was almost ready, and the Council was bringing exactly the force that humanity needed to demonstrate their new position in the galaxy. Soon, the hunters would become the hunted, and the quarantined species would announce their independence in a way that no one could ignore The age of humanity's silence was about to end with the roar of weapons that their former captors never saw coming. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, in chambers carved from solid rock and lined with metal that could stop any known weapon, Admiral Robert Hayes walked through corridors that had taken 30 years to build. The base stretched for kilometers, in every direction housing the command center for humanity's greatest secret. Today, those secrets would finally be revealed. Hayes entered the main operations room where hundreds of technicians worked at stations, monitoring ships and weapons scattered throughout the solar system. The walls showed displays of space around Earth, but most of the contacts on those screens were invisible to alien sensors. 50 years of careful construction had placed humanity's fleet in positions where they could strike without warning. Status report, Hayes said to his chief of staff, General Anna Kim. All vessels report ready for combat operations, Kim replied, consulting her tablet. 47 ships of the line, 18 destroyers, and 23 support vessels. Every captain knows their target and mission parameters. Hayes nodded and moved to the central display showing the positions of Council forces around Earth. The alien fleet had been growing for days as ships arrived from across the galaxy. 17 battle groups from 8 different species, exactly as intelligence had predicted. The Council was bringing overwhelming force to deal with what they believed was a primitive threat. They had no idea. They were walking into the most carefully planned ambush in galactic history. Signal from Captain Davis on the Retribution, reported the communications officer. Council forces are moving into bombardment formation. Intelligence estimates they plan to begin surface strikes within the hour. Hayes felt anger build in his chest but kept his voice steady. The aliens had watched humanity for 2 centuries, studying them like laboratory animals, and now they planned to exterminate them simply because they had learned to defend themselves. It was the ultimate expression of the Council's arrogance. All ships, this is Admiral Hayes, he said into his communication system. Operation Sunrise is now active. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and show these watchers what happens when humanity fights back. Throughout the solar system, human vessels began final preparations for battle. The Liberation, humanity's first dreadnought, hung in Jupiter's shadow with Captain Lisa Park, checking weapon systems that had been built using technology stolen from the very enemies they would soon face. Her ship alone carried enough firepower to destroy a planet, but it was only one of dozens preparing to strike. Near Mars, Commander Tom Rivera watched his squadron of destroyers charge their engines for the high-speed attack run that would shatter the Council's left flank. His ships were smaller and faster than anything the aliens possessed, built using human innovations that improved on captured technology. Each vessel carried weapons designed specifically to penetrate Council shields. An armor dot in the asteroid belt, hidden bases that had masqueraded as mining operations for decades revealed their true purpose. Weapons platforms the size of cities powered up energy cannons that could punch holes through the largest alien warships. Defense grids that looked like communication networks began charging particle beams that could sterilize entire fleets, but the most important part of the plan was invisible to both human and alien sensors. Throughout the galaxy, ships that had been watching Council worlds for years began moving toward their targets. If the Council wanted to play by the rules of total warfare, humanity was prepared to demonstrate that those rules applied to everyone. Sir, reported the intelligence officer, Council communications indicate they have detected some of our preparations. Several ships are breaking formation and requesting reinforcements. Hayes smiled grimly. Too late for that. Signal all units. Execute. Immediately. The first phase began with light itself. Across the solar system, human ships that had been cloaked since construction suddenly became visible as their stealth systems powered down. What had appeared to be empty space around Earth revealed itself to be filled with vessels of war, their sleek hulls gleaming with purpose as weapon systems came online. The alien shock was visible on intercepted communications. Commands in 12 different languages filled their networks as captains reported impossible readings and demanded explanations that their superiors couldn't provide. The primitive humans had somehow built a fleet that matched their own while remaining completely undetected. This is Admiral Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet. Hayes broadcasts on all Council frequencies, speaking in perfect galactic standard. You are trespassing in human space and threatening our world. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The response came from Admiral Vorth of the Council's 7th Fleet, his mechanical voice carrying centuries of authority. Unknown? Vessels, you are interfering with legal Council operations. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Hayes almost laughed at the aliens' arrogance. Even facing a fleet they hadn't known existed, the Council still believed they could simply order humanity to submit. That attitude was about to cost them everything. Council forces, Hayes replied. Humanity formally rejects your authority over our species. We know about your surveillance, your debates about our fate, and your decision to exterminate us. We will not go quietly into the night. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when humanity announced itself to the galaxy. A Council destroyer, perhaps acting on panic or old instincts, fired the first shot at the nearest human vessel. The energy beam that should have vaporized any primitive craft instead splashed harmlessly against shields that had been designed to stop exactly that kind of weapon. The human ship's response was devastating. Weapons that used principles the Council didn't understand carved through alien armor like paper, turning a destroyer that had terrorized a dozen worlds into expanding clouds of debris. The message was clear. Humanity had not just learned to build ships, they had learned to build better ships. All units engage at will. Hayes ordered. The battle began in earnest as human vessels struck from positions the aliens had never suspected. Ships that had been disguised as asteroids revealed themselves as they opened fire on Council formations. Destroyers that seemed to appear from nowhere raced through alien lines, their weapon systems overwhelming enemy shields that had never been tested against human technology. But the real shock came when the first Council reinforcements arrived and found human ships waiting for them at the edge of the system. Vessels that the aliens had never seen before, carrying technology that bent the laws of physics in impossible ways. The hunters had become the hunted, and the quarantined species was demonstrating that they had learned their lessons well. In his command center, Hayes watched displays showing battles throughout the solar system. Human losses were minimal while Council forces took damage they had never experienced before. Centuries of technological superiority were being swept away by a species they had considered too primitive to matter. Sir, reported his communications. Officer, we're receiving surrender requests from 7 Council ships. They're asking for terms. Hayes considered the request and made a decision that would echo through history. Tell them we'll accept surrender, but only unconditional. They will be treated according to human standards of warfare, which are more generous than they would have shown us. The tide of battle turned as word spread through the Council fleet that the humans were accepting surrenders and treating prisoners well. Ship after ship powered down weapons and transmitted surrender codes, preferring captivity to destruction at the hands of weapons they couldn't understand or counter. Within 6 hours, the battle was over. The Council fleet that had come to exterminate humanity lay broken, with most ships either destroyed or surrendered. Not a single human vessel had been lost, and casualties were limited to minor injuries from system overloads, but the real victory was just beginning. Across the galaxy, human ships revealed themselves at Council worlds, broadcasting the same message that Hayes had sent to the fleet above. Earth, humanity was no longer a quarantined species hiding in fear, they were a power that demanded recognition as equals. The age of secrets was over. The age of humanity's rise had begun. The morning sun rose over Earth as it had for billions of years, but today marked the first dawn of humanity's freedom. In cities across the planet, people stopped their daily routines to watch screens that showed impossible images. Alien warships, burning in space above their world. Defeated by human vessels that had appeared from nowhere, President Maria Gonzalez stood in the emergency briefing room beneath the White House, surrounded by world leaders who had been secretly briefed about humanity's real situation just hours before. The revelations had shattered everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. But the evidence was undeniable. Humanity had been prisoners, and now they were free. "The immediate threat is over," Admiral Hayes reported via secure communication from his lunar command center. "Council forces in our system have either surrendered or been destroyed. Our fleets throughout the galaxy are reporting similar success at Council homeworlds. Above Earth, the wreckage of alien ships drifted in orbit while human vessels moved to secure prisoners and salvage. The Altarian dreadnought Dominator, pride of the Council's 7th Fleet, hung powerless with its crew awaiting rescue by the very species they had come to exterminate. Its captain, Admiral Vorth, sat in his command chair struggling to understand how his technologically superior force had been defeated so completely. "This is impossible," Vorth said to his communications officer. "Our intelligence indicated these humans were barely capable of spaceflight. How did they build ships that can defeat our best technology?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Maria Santos materialized on the bridge of the alien vessel using transport technology that the Council had never seen before. Her uniform bore no rank insignia that Vorth recognized, but her presence commanded immediate attention from both human and alien crew members. "Admiral Vorth," Santos said in perfect Altarian, "I am here to accept your formal surrender and explain exactly how your primitive opponents managed to defeat you." Vorth's scales rippled with confusion. "You speak our language?" "We speak all your languages," Santos replied. "We've been listening to your communications for over 2 centuries. We know everything about your technology, your tactics, and your weaknesses. The question isn't how we defeated you. The question is why you never suspected we were watching." As Santos spoke, human technicians beamed aboard the alien vessel and began securing its crew. The process was carried out with military precision, but also with a respect for prisoner rights that surprised the Council forces. These humans, supposedly the violent savages that required quarantine, were treating their captors better than the Council treated most of its own citizens. "Your species monitored us for 200 years, Santos continued, studying our wars and conflicts while assuming we were too primitive to notice your presence. You saw our violence but missed our capacity for growth. You recorded our mistakes but ignored our ability to learn from them. On Earth below, the revelation of humanity's true situation sent shock waves through every government and news organization. Citizens who had gone to sleep thinking they were alone in the universe woke to find that alien civilizations had been controlling their development for centuries. The initial panic gave way to something deeper, a mixture of anger at their captivity and pride in their species' hidden achievements. In the Council chambers on distant Centauri Prime, emergency sessions convened as reports poured in from across the galaxy. Human fleets had appeared at 12 major Council worlds simultaneously, demonstrating a level of coordination and intelligence gathering that should have been impossible for a quarantined species. High Chancellor Vex received the reports with growing disbelief. The humans hadn't just broken their quarantine, they had turned it into an advantage. While the Council watched Earth openly, human agents had infiltrated Council worlds in secret, learning everything they needed to plan the perfect strike against their captors. "How many of our systems have been compromised?" Vex asked his intelligence chief. "All of them," came the devastating reply. "Human agents have been present in every Council system for at least 50 years. They know our military capabilities, our political structures, and our technological weaknesses better than we know them ourselves." The scope of humanity's deception was breathtaking. While appearing to struggle with basic spaceflight, they had built an intelligence network that spanned the galaxy. While seeming to fight primitive wars among themselves, they had secretly united to face an external threat. While pretending to be violent and unpredictable, they had planned and executed the most sophisticated military operation in galactic history, but the real shock came when human representatives made contact with the Council directly. The message was broadcast simultaneously to every Council world, carried by communication technology that bypassed all known security measures. Admiral Hayes appeared on screens throughout the galaxy, his image clear and his voice carrying the authority of a species that had earned its freedom through intelligence and determination. Behind him stood representatives from every nation on Earth, united for the first time in their planet's history. Leaders of the Galactic Council, Hayes began. I am Admiral Robert Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force. For 2 centuries, your species have held humanity in quarantine, watching us like specimens in a laboratory while debating whether we deserve to live or die. Today that arrangement ends. The message continued with a detailed accounting of everything humanity had learned about the Council during their captivity. Names, locations, military capabilities, and political weaknesses were laid out with surgical precision. It was a demonstration of intelligence gathering that made the Council's own spy networks look primitive by comparison. We know about the rebellion on Kepler 9 that you suppressed, Hayes continued, his voice growing colder. We know about the 3 species you exterminated for developing faster-than-light travel. We know about your debates regarding our own fate, and your decision to implement Final Protocol 7 against our world. Images flashed on screens throughout Council space, showing classified documents and recordings that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. The evidence painted a picture of a galactic government that maintained power through fear and destruction, eliminating any species that might challenge their authority. But we also know about your weaknesses, Hayes said, and now his voice carried a note of warning that made every Council leader shift uncomfortably. Your technology relies on quantum principles that we have learned to disrupt. Your military doctrine assumes technological superiority that you no longer possess. Your political structure depends on species that are beginning to question your right to rule. Throughout the galaxy, the effects of Hayes' words were immediate. On a dozen worlds, species that had been suppressed by Council authority began broadcasting their own messages of support for humanity's actions. The revelation that the supposedly primitive humans had outsmarted their overlords gave hope to countless beings who had never dared to resist. On the manted homeworld, General Corax found himself facing a crowd of his own soldiers demanding to know why they served a council that could be so easily deceived. The crystalline beings of Zeta Prime began transmitting poetry celebrating humanity's victory over tyranny. Even the mechanical minds of the Silicon Collective questioned the logic of a system that had failed so completely. Back on Earth, the human population was experiencing its own transformation. The revelation that their species had been capable of such sophisticated deception and military planning changed how they saw themselves. No longer were they primitive beings struggling to survive on a single world. They were the descendants of the species that had outwitted the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. In schools and universities, teachers struggled to explain how human history would need to be rewritten. The wars and conflicts that had seemed so important were revealed as distractions that had hidden humanity's true development. The space program that appeared to be fumbling with basic rocket technology had actually been cover for the construction of starships that could challenge any force in the galaxy. But Hayes wasn't finished with his message to the Council. We extend an offer to the species of the galaxy, he said, his image broadcast to every inhabited world within 1,000 light years. Humanity bears no ill will toward beings who have been misled by the Council's propaganda. We invite you to join us in building a new galactic community based on cooperation rather than domination. The offer was revolutionary. Instead of replacing the Council with their own authority, humans were proposing something that had never existed, a truly democratic galaxy where species could determine their own fate without fear of extermination by their more powerful neighbors. On Luna, Admiral Hayes concluded his historic broadcast and turned to face his staff. The battle for humanity's freedom had been won, but the war for galactic democracy was just beginning. Council forces throughout space were regrouping and preparing for a counterattack that would test every system humanity had built in secret. Status: report on all fronts, Hayes ordered. 17 Council worlds have declared neutrality and are requesting negotiations, reported his intelligence chief. 8 more are experiencing internal rebellion. However, the core Council systems are mobilizing their full military resources. Intelligence estimates they're preparing to deploy weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. Hayes nodded grimly. The Council's response was predictable but dangerous. Faced with the collapse of their authority, they would resort to increasingly desperate measures to maintain power. The next phase of the conflict would test humanity's resolve and their ability to protect the species that had chosen to side with them. Signal all fleet commanders, Hayes ordered. Phase 2 begins immediately. We've broken the silence, but now we need to prove that freedom is worth fighting for. Throughout human space, ships that had revealed themselves during the first battle began moving toward their next objectives. The element of surprise was gone, but humanity had other advantages that the Council was only beginning to understand. Centuries of being underestimated had taught them patience, planning, and the value of fighting for something greater than themselves. The age of humanity's captivity was over. The age of their leadership in a free galaxy had just begun. Above Earth, the debris of alien warships caught the light of Sol and scattered it in brilliant patterns across the sky, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories came not from strength, but from the refusal to accept that freedom was impossible. In the depths of space, human vessels moved toward battles that would determine the fate of countless worlds. Behind them, Earth turned slowly in its orbit, no longer a prison but a symbol of what any species could achieve. When they refused to accept the limits placed on them by others, the silence had been broken, and the sound that emerged was the voice of an entire species demanding its place among the stars.